So Agile is certainly one of my passions. I sometimes wonder if it's not dated back to my most favorable subjects, maths and art, right? It's such a complex world that we live in. And, you know, running a business on the one side and being very creative on the other side, you know, it speaks to Agile. To me, it sort of, you know, marries the creative world with the business world. And today I want to focus on, you know, things beyond the obvious Agile. And that's why I've sort of titled it Beyond Agile. To have a better understanding of the subject, we might need to look beyond the corporate world even and beyond software development. I sometimes think the best way to explain it is to sort of make something very complex, very simple, almost like focusing on the nearest thing, like driving at night, driving to Cape Town, for instance. But you just focus on what you can see now. We have a vision, we know where we're going to Cape Town, that's the vision. But we just focus where the lights are shining, we just focus in the now. These few words that I read a while ago really explains it so well. Our Agile organizations being consistently adaptive to change, they inspect and they adapt. But I think what's very important is that Agile organizations have an institutional ability to make change the advantage. Change is the competitive advantage. So I want to delve into that a little bit. And of course, into the philosophy. I feel as leaders, we need to understand the philosophy. Now, look, you don't necessarily need to be a leader, right? You don't need to be an executive or be the CEO of the company or C-level individual. We can absolutely lead from behind. In actual fact, we want to lead from behind. So this is something I saw not too long ago, and I thought, 3 simple rules to escape poverty. And this is it: graduate high school or equivalent, wait to have children until you are married and older than 21, and keep a full-time job. And I thought, sure, that's quite interesting. That gives you a 75% of joining middle class. And of course, not following any of the rules gives you a good 76% chance of living in poverty. And I thought, wow, isn't that something? Can't we create a few, we don't need to call it rules because in the Agile community, we don't like rules necessarily, but can't we create just a few items that we can live by and that can guarantee us, you know, 75% success? So today we want to speak about exactly that, business agility. So business agility for me goes far beyond an Agile delivery team. I mean, if we look at the words sort of individually, right, we know what a business is. Fundamentally, a business creates something, a product, a service. It's a creative thing. Of course, adds value to the market. And it's probably profitable because it's run in an optimal way. If we look at Agile or agility or just the Agile delivery side, of course, most of you probably know what that looked like. We've got an Agile framework implemented. What I really liked about Saret and Stephen mentioning that it's not about the framework, and it's not, really it's not, and you're going to see that today probably. But it is a good start. So Agile delivery team typically have an Agile framework implemented or methodology that works for them. They've probably restructured the organization into Agile teams. They deliver in iterations. Customer feedback loops is something that they value. So there are many items, right, that's important on the agility and delivery side, but it almost feels like there's something missing. It feels like there's something in between that could potentially take us to another level, that could potentially just take us to an agility level, business agility level, beyond just Agile. You're probably familiar with this picture. If you've read up on Agile or if you've done some training, we always have this Scrum Master element, right? In some organizations, it's called the Agile Coach. facilitating this process of delivery, right? Making sure we're running as an efficient team, and focusing on the delivery. We, of course, have the product owner concept as well, by the way, in any framework and any methodology that you use. And typically what I see in the big corporates is this product owner role in multiple layers within the organization even. Driving, like Stephen really nicely explained, not just driving delivery only, but actually driving a very valuable product for our end customer. So what I want to focus on today is that third element. Now, you might be familiar with this picture. I don't know if we would have recognized this picture 2 years ago, but today we all know what that represents, right? It represents a temperature check, if you will. So I want to do a little bit of a temperature check and just see what the atmosphere looks like, what the philosophy looks like, if we focus on that. Now, to get there, I need to give you a little bit of a disclaimer. I do run my own business apart from the business unit within DVT. I myself and my husband, we've got a business on the side, a property business. What we do is we buy dilapidated properties such as this one. We renovate them, transform them, if you will, agile transformation, property transformation. And yeah, that's what we do. And we basically either rent them or sell them. So there was a year where I thought my next renovation, my next reno project, I really want to run it as a pure agile project. Little did I know that it will be the biggest project that we've ever taken on, me and my husband. There was really lots to do. As you can see, dilapidated home. But there was a few things that was important for us, and we didn't have training. My husband and the team, it was only me that sort of knew this philosophy and driving this philosophy. So here's the gist of it. We had $1 million budget to spend on this project because agile teams typically have a fixed budget, right? We had a fixed timeline because we took the budget, some material planning, limited planning, by the way, and we could say, all right, we've got a 3-month period, we've got $1 million budget, and that basically gave us 4 teams that we could work with. Let's call them a boundary wall team and a roof team to replace the roof, a building team, and sort of an ad hoc team. And there was about 4 to 5 members in that team. So about 20 people on site for 3 months. And this is basically what it looked like from an agile perspective. We kept the vision visible. That was something that was very important for me, is to share the vision. With the limited things we've had, by the way, we didn't have an architect, we didn't have a designer, we didn't have a contractor. We filled those roles. That's our passion. That's what we do. So visualization, I want to say there's a focus for me on visualization. As you can see, we've used something very simple, a Kanban board, a few stickies. Probably the biggest challenge over here was the dust, and our stickies didn't want to stick, but we did see it out. It was important to create a pull system also. I think this is also quite key in agile teams, is for us as leaders to enable a pull system, and just share the vision as far as you can. Of course, as sort of product owners ourselves on this product, we didn't know exactly how to get to our vision. We knew what we wanted to do, but we didn't really know how to get there. So you can imagine the importance of communication between product ownership and the actual team. So emphasis on that as well. I want to show you actually what the limited planning looked like. So this was a hand-drawn plan of the property, and I just used some colors literally just to indicate where walls needed to come out and new windows needed to be fitted. Very limited planning, and in agile we call it just-in-time planning, just in time design, if you will. Just a few pictures of really what it looked like. And of course, with limited planning and limited design, you sort of feel like you need to overcompensate for that by using communication. So that's exactly what we did. Lots of communication, actually, lots of visualization, as you can see, physically showing the team this wall needs to come out, physically, communicating to the team. And of course, needless to say, we had lots of fun doing that. I think what was also important for us is not just the communication with the team, but also staying adaptable. With projects such as this, it was important for us really not to have a very set plan and even a set way in which we would do it. We would literally, because we both have a day job, we would literally in the mornings have a stand up in front of our window, kitchen window, just communication that's necessary for that day, go to our day jobs, and in the afternoon come back and sort of do a review, right, of what has been done and what next. That was also something that was important for us, to keep the team enabled, leave them to do it during the day. We weren't there. And this is typically what we come across with many Agile projects. I want to say with some Agile transformations and projects, it can sometimes feel a bit messy. It can sometimes feel like we seriously need to break down old habits and old ways of thinking and old structures even. I've got a good example. One of our clients, banking clients, they challenged 80-year-old processes, 80-year-old structures. It was a very old business in the financial institute. So some of it might feel really tough. My advice is literally just to keep going. Sometimes you just need to break through those habits and those processes and those structures to get to a successful end. Maybe also very important through such an Agile project is to celebrate those small successes. Of course, celebrating the big successes, but the focus today, or the advice today, is to celebrate the small successes. Like the roof, for instance, there was certainly some of the scope which we knew, like replacing the roof was an obvious one for us. It was leaking, it was old. But the rest, literally, when we started with the project, we didn't know, how it's going to end exactly and which walls we really want to keep. We just started. And as leaders, I think it's important for us to keep the focus rather on the rhythm. Create that rhythm, that constant rhythm. Everybody on this project eventually knew morning stand-ups, this is typically what we do, and we discuss the backlog, and they've got an opportunity to pull from the backlog. In the afternoons, we demo and we showcase our work. So as a leader, just keep that focus on the atmosphere, I want to say, the rhythm and the atmosphere. Keeping it light was important for us. We had time for jokes, for instance. We actually found that we had a really motivated team. The teams every day started earlier and earlier. Eventually, it ended up being 6 o'clock in the morning, and the neighbors started saying, it's a little bit early. And then the team started asking us, can they work 7 days a week? And we said, actually, no, we prefer not to work on Sundays. So there were elements that really showed us this is a successful Agile project. We've got motivated teams. We've got variable scope. I want to elaborate a little bit on the variable scope, for example. What we said to each other every day is like, if something happens unforeseen and we needed to move in tomorrow, like what do we want to complete today? So that was how we sort of just drove a variable scope on a daily basis. Of course, we had lots of fun, healthy competition between the 4 teams, and there was an ice cream truck every Saturday, and when they hear the ice cream truck and the sound, everybody knew it's ice cream time. It was a very interesting project, and with a specific focus on being an Agile project. Definitely, during this process, things sometimes get messy, and you start questioning and your choices, and you might even during a project start questioning the staff that you've appointed and allocated to the project, and you might even question the approach, a little bit of doubt, and just sometimes you can feel like giving up. So I think what's important is, as leaders, as product owners, as designers, leading a business and leading a transformation, leading a project, is to keep your focus on the vision. Now I can show you my vision now, but of course this vision it was all my head, right? For those who enjoy before and after photos, I love before and after photos. I'll do this a few times. But explaining this vision with lots of communication and visually making it as appealing as possible was quite hard. It really was. But let that vision be your inspiration. I think what also typically happens on projects, right, is life happens. We deal with people. I think it's so important. Sometimes as organizations, we feel like it's a products business, and it might be, but actually all businesses are a people business. It's all about the people. So life happens, right? So what happened is my husband was admitted to a hospital for about a week, and even my son, so if you're a sensitive viewer, please don't look, he's going to get an injection. Even my son stepped into one of the roof nails, the rusted roof nail, had to get an injection. So, life happens in between. And I think it's all about how we handle these things, right? If we're running an agile project, it basically means that we've got a variable scope. We don't have a fixed schedule, right? As an agile project, we really don't have a fixed schedule. So luckily, we went behind on schedule. I mean, my husband is sort of the brains on this project. He just makes things happen. He was crucial on this project. And I'm sure you've got those individuals on your project as well. So what we had to do is we just had to stay adaptable. And we just literally looked at the backlog. We altered the backlog. We focused on the items that I was comfortable with, helping the team, communicating the team, driving the team. And that's basically how we handle it. And I think that's part of the statistics of successful agile projects is we can adjust to certain situations. Everything these days are just unpredictable. So the predictability should actually be in the process and not anywhere else in how we handle the situation. Maybe a good example is the challenges. Statistically, waterfall projects, traditional projects, and even agile projects they will be challenged. There will always be challenges. But it's the way in which we are able to adjust ourselves and handle those challenges. Maybe a good example is the vanities that we ordered online from Cape Town that arrived late as we were moving in, actually, as you can see there on the left-hand side. And, we didn't get emotional about it. We just, we didn't follow a definitive plan. So we literally just added it to the backlog that it needs to be, installed, and somebody picked it up and it was installed. It might have been like literally the day before we moved in, before we went live with our product, but it was okay. And there was, many examples of that. I want to focus on the minimal viable product. This is so important. There's so many discussions around the minimal viable product. And with most clients that I speak to, they would immediately tell you, we don't have a minimal viable product. Like if we build a car, we need to just release the full car. You can't release half the car. And, it is, and even for me, really, it is a very difficult thing to imagine. But this is a little bit of advice from my side. As you can see, this was our minimal viable product. This was the day or day after we've moved in. Is it something to be proud of? No, it's not. But it's done, right? Done is better than perfect. This is one of the things we like saying in the Agile community. Done is better than perfect. I want to say, if you should maybe never feel like your product is release ready. Because if you feel your product is release ready, it's not a minimal viable product anymore. So this is a good illustration of a minimum viable product. I mean, for us, we defined the minimal viable product. We said basically what we need is a roof over our heads. It needs to be livable on the inside. Actually, the outside, you know, if it's not even painted, it's fine. And the basic things needs to work, like flashable toilets and, you know, working showers and really, for the perfectionist in me, this is quite difficult, and most of us have that perfectionist ability. We want everything to be perfect. Life is not perfect, and your staff is not perfect, and your product actually isn't perfect, and that's okay. So yeah, done is really truly better than perfect. So another thing that we like saying in the Agile community is just stop starting and start finishing. Just finish something and start adding value. And of course, there's a cost involved as well in terms of delaying your minimal viable product. So for us in this instance, what it looked like is we, of course, paid where we were at that stage. And after 3 months, we said we financially needed to move in. Otherwise, we didn't stick to our 1 million budget. So there's a cost of delay also in terms of a minimal viable product. Maybe again, for those who like before and after photos, just to show you a little bit what it looked like in the inside. It was ready and we could move in, and we had, you know, bathrooms and we had a kitchen. So again, the perfectionist in me really struggled to add this photo to the slide. So some of you that's very analytical would have seen why. The floor in our kitchen, there's a flaw, right? There's a bug, okay? And it needs to be fixed. But we're already getting value out of this product. We're using it. It's working. Yes, there's a bug. It's not ideal. But I want you to just absorb that. Sometimes we just need to live with things. And when there's value, you know, go with the value, and eventually you get to the bug fixes. And that's fine. So that sort of takes me to the second iteration, right? This is how we do it in the Agile world. We work in iterations. We work towards a minimum viable product, and from there we'll, you know, improve, adapt and improve. So this gives you a little bit of an idea of phase 2. Again, you know, just in time design, just in time planning. In actual fact, I remember doing this. I don't know if you can call it a design, this photo on my phone. I was on the plane. It's normally wasted time. And I was busy sort of drawing what I imagine the next phase being. And the emphasis here is on just in time, just enough to start and add value. So maybe a good example is this, just an idea, a design, and eventually you get to the outcome. Sort of back to minimal viable products. Again, this is such a difficult topic. How do you build a pool that's a minimal viable product, right? Because you feel like you need the pool and it needs to be filled with water. It needs to be finished. It needs to have coping and probably paving as well. So this is what I thought. I thought it won't be possible to do a pool as a minimum viable product. So I introduced a minimum viable product. So I want to emphasize again, we are never proud of our minimum viable product. So this is what it looked like, right? Minimal viable product for my customers being my 2 sons, my 2 boys. And the point was, and probably the goal of any minimal viable product is, let's just see if the customer is going to use it. Let's just see, is it worth spending the money? Is it worth the investment? So needless to say, with this minimal viable product, they showed us that it was worth spending the money, and we need to build the pool. So we did. So we built them the pool. What I didn't know, lesson learned through this journey, what I didn't know is that this was also a minimal viable product. We certainly didn't consider it done before it started getting used, right? Um, so again, I'm speaking to myself also. We might miss this. We might miss the minimal viable product. So we had, of course, a few iterations, about, let's call it 4 or 5 iterations before we completed this specific project in an agile fashion. I think what is really important is to celebrate the successes, and often take time to look back and just see how far you've come in the process. Not just the product, but the journey. The journey is so important, not just the product. I mean, the product is nice because it's tangible and you can see it and feel it. But the journey, going through that journey is very important. Your staff typically is not going to initiate something like this. So I encourage leaders to do this. Take time often to look back and just see how far you've come. Yeah, just another example of that. I think another aspect to, just looking how far you've come is to look at your sort of social responsibility. It feels like most projects do have that, a social responsibility. For us, it was obviously creating jobs. It's a challenge in South Africa. It was uplifting an area, for instance. There was actually many learnings during this process. Respectively, if I look at it now, there was quite a few. It was a 3-month project, which actually sounds like a short duration project, but it did take a long time. It felt like a long time. It was daunting, but there was a lot of learning. So I think one of the biggest learnings for me was it just felt like we're missing something. We're missing something in the agile world. We're missing something that I want to call a mindset manifesto, just a mindset that we apply in the creative world, because, creating software and creating products, it is a creative world that we live in. It is a professional world, but it is a creative world that we live in. So there's many things I can't show you on photos, and those are the sort of, I want to say, the underpinned values and principles. It's typically those things that there's a saying. It says, they may forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel, right? So it feels almost it's that element that we're missing in the agile world. Those values for me certainly was, ethics and creativity, honesty, excellence, of course, motivation, and keeping the team focused on the right things, keeping myself focused, not focused on the overwhelming product, but focused on the rhythm rather than anything else. Staying flexible, that really challenged us. So we needed to stay flexible to really call this an agile project. Of course, we needed to be innovative during a project such as this. We needed to be efficient, right? Otherwise, the 3 months would have gone by and we wouldn't have been able to move in. We needed a reliable team. And we did. I mean, the team that we worked with, we've worked with before on many of our renovation projects. We knew their skills. We wanted to enable them. We wanted to give them an enjoyable experience. We wanted their commitment, and we got that. We wanted them to have courage. So there's many things that you as a leader can sort of unlock in the agile world. That sort of speaks to the philosophy, in a sense. It really does for me, the business agility philosophy that we're aiming for. There was just so many things that I can share with you that we've observed during this, and hopefully some of the items that you can take to your project. Things like having no scope. It wasn't always comfortable, but if I look back at it now, it was so enjoyable because we weren't fixed to a plan. We weren't executing a plan. We had a fixed budget, we had a fixed timeline, and no fixed scope. That's a typical Agile project. Don't be too directive. I realize that's how you enable teams. That's how you get them to engage and fully own the task. Share the problem. That was something we learned as well during this process. In the mornings, we realized, there's things that there's dependencies, for instance, there's a problem. We didn't try and solve everything by ourselves. We included the team and asked them their opinion and made the statement of what the problem is. Have them, go at it in terms of how to resolve it. And most of those problems weren't resolved by us. and create a culture of trust. It's such a difficult thing. I presented training to a group yesterday, and I asked the question, how do you create trust? How do you almost immediately create trust in your teams? I always feel like if you're vulnerable in front of your teams, if you're transparent in front of your teams, those things really do add to creating trust amongst your team. Of course, enable creativity. I mean, that's what it's all about, is creativity. We are humans. We want to be creative, and those things that are mundane, we've got machine learning and robotic process engineering and all those things that we can, let's rather aim for those creative things. That's what we're designed to do. Just interesting, something that Michael Ketterer said. It's one of the idol singers. I don't know if you know him. If you are surviving, you can't dream. It feels to me there's a certain element of that, yeah. If you can't enable staff and you overload them and they're barely coping, you lose that creativity. Of course, employ people with passion, sure, but that makes the world of difference. I mentioned earlier, we think we've got a product business, but actually all of us, we do have a people's business. Manage the product and not the people. Also something that I really had to remind myself of very often, and let go of perfection. Wow, that was a lesson for me, and maybe it's just me, but letting go of perfection. Eventually I bought myself one of those, handmade Persian carpets, because it's never perfect. Just when I see it, I remind myself, like, life is not perfect, people are not perfect, projects aren't perfect. So yeah, let go of the perfection, just focus on done. Done is better than perfect, and let's just get a few things done. Keep the focus on the vision, reiterate the vision as often as you can. That was super important for us. We knew we had to overcompensate for the limited amount of design, limited amount of documentation that we had. Of course, own the responsibility of mastery. I always think of the human scientific motivators: mastery, purpose, and autonomy. If you own the responsibility of mastery, people want to be enabled, they want feedback, they want to be trained. Own that responsibility. Of course, clear direction, clear boundaries, own the rhythm, own the framework. I loved it when Stephen and Sarah read. It was so interesting that they both said, like, the framework is great, but that's not the focus. Just take the framework, use it for what it is. It's there to enable you and get you to a point of agility. But you can certainly take it further than that. Create that emotional connection with your product and your service, and assist people around you to create that emotional connection to your product and your service. Drive diversity. I'm so passionate about that. I sometimes do see organizations with very one-dimensional, I don't want to say one-dimensional individuals, that's not what it is, but it's the same people. They look the same, they think the same, they're probably the same age. Diversity creates just such an interesting element in Agile teams. And of course, the atmosphere, I think I mentioned the atmosphere, the temperature check, if you will. Create that atmosphere where you feel you can be less in control and just create more vision and visibility. And of course, have fun while you're at it. I mean, while you've got the opportunity and you want to just have fun while you're at it. So this is actually a lot to take in terms of learnings. So what I basically thought of is maybe just wrapping it up. So I was hoping many of you are probably familiar with the Agile Manifesto. So the Agile Manifesto to me is it's good learning, but it is so focused on technology and software creation that it felt like we needed something that's on the philosophy side, on the business side, just a different manifesto, because as you saw, this project had absolutely nothing to do with software, right? So what is that? What is that manifesto? So I'd like to share with you my thoughts. Focus on the people and not the product. So if you are familiar with the manifesto, you'll know that, you know, we feel like, well, there's value in the items in bold. There is value in the items in bold. We value the items in blue a little bit more, right? So focus on the people and not just the product. Focus on that rhythm, create that just rhythm. I always use the example of a work-life balance. A work-life balance actually is a rhythm. Just focus on that rhythm and not necessarily a specific milestone. Value that visualization. Wow, visualization to me really is the emphasis, not the frameworks. We've got fantastic frameworks. I use Kanban personally. Scrum is amazing. SAFe gives you a nice way of scaling this subject. But visualization in all layers of the organization. This is where we see benefits in HR, in marketing, in various areas within the organization. Just visualization, value visualization over a specific framework. Frequent communication. I think we all know this. It's very valuable. Frequent communication over feedback. If I say feedback, it includes those reports, you know, commands going down in the organization and reports going up in the organization. It includes those reports. See if you can't satisfy that requirement by having communication rather than a requirement for a monthly report or a weekly report. Of course, being responsive over being well organized. Being well organized is again of value, but aligning yourself to be responsive to whatever is thrown your way, that is of more value. And adaptability, again, just to be able to just adjust and quickly adapt and just move forward over any specific scope. So yeah, that sort of concludes what I'd like to call sort of, you know, the business agility manifesto, if you will. And maybe on top of that, just a reminder to have fun. Have fun while you're doing it. Just have fun. This is a picture of some of our leadership a while ago in a hot air balloon, pretending it's falling. Just have fun while doing it. Thanks,
Thank you, Melani. That was great. And I think, as per comments from Jen, a great example of how to see the Agile concepts put in place practically. I'm going to invite our audience, please. If you have questions for Melani, please do log those in the chat window and we'll put those through to her. In the interim, Melani, I will ask you this that occurred to me while you were talking about your team that was working on the renovation. How did you introduce the concept of Agile to them? I'm going to assume that they had never heard of it before, and they're going, here's this crazy woman that wants to now suddenly stand around in the morning, look at sticky notes, and build a house.
That's exactly what it was, Cole. So I didn't give it a name. I didn't introduce it. Basically, you know, it just shows you don't necessarily need training, right? You don't necessarily, we've got a client that we started with Agile coaching about 1.5 years ago. And we didn't start with training. We just, you know, started with something. I always tell teams, just start with something. So literally that's what it was called. No, they didn't know the subject. They probably still don't know what Agile really is. But they just latched onto that. I think it empowered them. They felt like, wow, I can pull my items from the backlog, and yeah, they probably did think initially I'm mad, but yes, that's how we started.
Awesome. Melani, if you would just drop the presentation, then folks can see you full screen for the moment. I'm sure that they want to ask you a couple of things shortly. Let's see what we have coming through. At the moment, everyone's still enjoying the talk, I think. Here's one from Mark. And in a few words, what is the lesson learned? What is the biggest advantage of the approach that you took?
I think it's a good question. I think the biggest advantage for me using this as an example was probably the fact that we were so flexible. We knew being flexible meant to us, we are not going to go over budget, right? So I think that was very important for us. We only had $1 million to spend. We only had 3 months. That was reality. So I think for us, the biggest advantage was just the flexibility in the scope, knowing that it will guarantee not going over budget and it will guarantee not going over timeline.
And I think in your presentation, again, you brought it back to the core elements in all of these things, business agility, philosophies, and agile frameworks, etc. It comes back to the people. And you spoke about the passion of the people within the projects being a key element. How did you maintain the motivation of folks and connect it back with the deliverables that were coming out, or at least the progression in the project?
Yeah, it is an interesting one, especially with a longer duration project. But I think the motivation for me wasn't necessarily focused on motivating those individuals. They are motivated individuals. They love what they do. They're good at what they do. So I think that set us up for success, right? So the motivation for us wasn't necessary to keep them motivated in doing what they're doing. We applied them correctly, and they love what they're doing. So I think that's probably lesson learned in terms of who we allocate to which project. I'm thinking of the Gallup Strengths Finder. The Gallup Strengths Finder gives us that insight, for instance, like what is this person good at, and what do they naturally enjoy, and assign them to those types of things. So I think, for instance, we had sort of this ad hoc team and building team. So between those teams, we would actually ask them, like, what would you want to work on? Would you rather break out this wall and do this, or would you? So I think enabling them, giving them choices where possible, that really kept them motivated. They weren't used to that, by the way.
Awesome. And I think there was like a real diamond in there when you were talking about minimum viable products, and the idea that the MVP, there might well be stages to an MVP earlier than people consider. So not the full finalized pool, but hey, right before that is a quarter full pool that people are going to enjoy. And even before that is the prototype blow up pool. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But it's, again, most often not something that you're proud of, but it is something you can get in front of your client, and it is something you can get feedback on. And that drives the process, and that drives sort of where to go next. That gives you feedback. It gives you some sense of feedback. So absolutely. In this example, we were the customer also sometimes. But again, as the customer on this project also, I didn't necessarily know what I want. But when I started seeing something, then I knew what I want, right? And that I find is quite typical of customers and clients. If you just ask them, like, what do you want? They might give you guidelines, but they don't really can give you details until they have something tangible to see. And when they see it, they realize, actually, no, that's not what I want. And by the way, this also happened on the project, right? We would do something, realize this, actually, now that we see it, no, this doesn't work, and break it down and start again. And we do see that in software teams as well, right? They start with something, and as business leaders, we need to get used to that. If we need to throw away some code or some prototype, that's okay. We've had learnings from it. Yes, it came at a cost, but we paid for our learnings, basically.
Okay, and I guess that connects in with your comment or the value of visualizations within the engagement process. In terms of a more traditional sort of software development engagement, what would you be calling out as the types of visualizations folks should be thinking about as they progress through a project?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Visualization for me is important at all levels within the organization. And I think we're used to the obvious. We're used to visualizing our backlog as a development team. We visualize typically our retrospective sessions, our lean coffee sessions are visual. But to me, it's more than that. To me, it's visualizing what's important, whatever that may be. So in my business in DVT, the consultants are the most important thing for the business. The clients are the most important thing for this business, right? So visualizing that in a way and creating focus on what's important for the business. So it might look very different for different teams. And you can get so creative by visualizing your work. And you'll be surprised how much insight you get from just visualizing what you do.
And in your project, particularly with the one that you've shown us in the presentation today, the 3-month element to that being a boundary to the progression, were there times when you looked at what was going on and you kind of felt we're not going to make it, or were you always looking at it going, everything's going to be fine?
I think every day was a day like that. I think every day was, oh, are we going to make it? But we knew we had to make it. We had a fixed scope. And not a fixed scope. We had a fixed budget. We had, a fixed timeline, and we had to make it work. We're going live on that date, and it needs to be quality. So if we don't finish a few items, it was deciding which items are we okay with if it's not done. And a good example was, we literally said, if the outside of the house isn't painted by the time we go live, that's okay. We don't need the outside to be painted, right? It won't be pretty, but it's livable. So it was really just driving on a daily basis, literally on a stand-up daily basis, driving value for our investment and for our timeline.
And I think that connects really well with a concept and a piece that Stephen focused on in the last session when he was talking about boundaries and the driver of value across business agility, to be conscious and aware of what will be valuable and prioritizing the things that contribute to that. And then again, continuously ensuring the alignment between what you are doing and the realization of the eventual value, and that overlap between the two things in work efforts and value realization. And I guess Absolutely. In a practical project that was a bit easier to see in terms of what you were working with.
Absolutely. And you mentioned a word now, alignment. When you create an alignment for staff, in other words, that vision is so visible and so well communicated. Everybody is working towards a certain vision. There's alignment in the teams. And guess what that does? It just takes away the active management. It creates autonomy in teams. They know exactly where we're going, and they've got the expertise. So mostly they know how to get us there. But it is constant communication and alignment in terms of where we're going, where we're taking this project.
Okay, and now the hard question, which is the one that we always hold in reserve for our speakers. So the engagement and the process produced a fantastic result. What would you have changed in the process or the approach that would have made it even more successful or delivered even additional value to what you achieved out of the approach that you took?
Well, that is a difficult one.
That's why we saved that for the last couple of minutes, Melani. So you're allowed at least a minute to think about it while our audience is thinking of any other questions that they're going to have today.
Yeah, I think, and this is typically what we see, by the way, it's some of the top reasons for Agile failing. There's many reasons for Agile failing, but some of it is the product owner not being available enough, right? So that's certainly something that probably could have helped, just being more available. In reality, we both had our day jobs, so we couldn't be more available. But that is a big factor in this project, and as well as in many other projects, is availability of that product owner, the person that's driving the vision, the person that has the vision. There are other failures, for instance, that I can think of, just statistically, of why Agile projects fail. For instance, we're looking at millennials coming into the workforce very quickly. They reckon by 2030, 75% of our workforce will be millennials. Well, millennials aren't motivated by high pay. Their number one motivation is meaningful work. Like, just give them meaningful work. So I think that was a big driver for us also. I don't think we were 100% successful there, but helping the team know what they're working on. They're not just breaking down a wall and putting in a window. Help them see why they're doing it. Like give them the meaning of why they're doing it. So definitely we could have done a little bit more in that sense as well.
Great. I'm just going to check and see if I've missed anything on the chat side of things. Folks are being very respectful and quiet today in terms of their things. I assume that's because potentially in South Africa, another long weekend is coming soon. Right. There was at least a compliment for you there, Melani. So from Marius, as someone migrating to more agile approach, this has been really valuable and great. Thanks for the comment, Marius. And Jackie had asked, thank you, Melani, if you had to do it over, what would you do differently? You'd go to waterfall, right?
No, certainly not. I think that's the last thing I'll do is go to waterfall. Yeah, I think it's probably what I mentioned now in terms of what we would do differently. I do think our availability, I think, was a challenge, and I do think that's the one thing I would try to change next time. You know, if I think of just agile and sort of agility, business agility, you know, in a world of exponential change and ever increasing complexity, if we just focus on the things that we can influence, just focus on the things that we know drives agility, I do think that sort of will get you there. Will it ever be perfect? Probably not. I think there's learnings in all of this. It's exactly what you rightfully asked, is the retrospective side of it. What would we change? There are many small things, but I think the big things does add up to the statistics in terms of why agile teams would typically fail. So yeah, this was an interesting journey.
Great, thanks, Melani. I think in terms of the 3 sessions that we've run during the course of this month around business agility, I think they've shown a great link between looking at it from an enterprise point of view, looking at the additional considerations in terms of boundaries that will help with that alignment to value and the delivery of value, and then your practical implementation of it and showing how those concepts are lived. I think that's been enormously valuable for people looking at this concept. For somebody that's sitting in an enterprise today and going, my organization is far from agile. My organization talks about it or is looking to implement it. Where would you advise that they start? What's the beginning of the roadmap for somebody like that?
I think it's almost like starting to change, starting with a new habit, starting to run, right? Where do you start? You put your tackies on. Like literally, that's where you start. If you want to start with a running habit or a exercise program, you just start by putting your tackies on. And to me, it's similar. Just start with the very basics. The very basics being either training, just put a board up. We know it's these days more digital board than a physical board, but agile teams, we love physical boards. There's just something about a physical board. Just start with that, because if you start in that iteration of stand-ups, because you've got a board now, and reviews and retrospectives, actually what you're doing is you're inspecting, adapting, inspecting and adapting. And that will get you to business agility. That will get you to a level of maturity. So literally just start anywhere, but start, put your tackies on.
And if you were going to say that there were perhaps 3 key factors that would influence success for somebody starting on that journey, fine, they've got the boards, they're starting to do the stand-ups, but would there be something like, I don't know, executive sponsorship or anything like that? You would go, these are the things that will really matter to this finding traction within your organization?
Yeah, I can think of one. So leadership buy-in is important, right? But leadership participation is super important. You really do have a good chance of failing if you don't have leadership participation. Leadership buy-in is great because that does enable teams, and we've seen teams being very successful in their delivery because there's buy-in from leadership. But leadership participation takes it to the next level. It really does.
Fantastic. Last question, I think, for today from Sebastian. Sebastian says he finds it difficult to understand why companies are sticking to waterfall, even though they are not bound by regulatory or audit requirements in terms of that. So I guess the translation of that is, what do you think are the barriers that still exist today in organizations even considering Agile? What is it that they remain rooted in some of the philosophies or approaches of the past?
I think a lot of them are myths, things like there's a belief that Agile is for small projects. It's just for, it's just for IT and it's just for small projects, and Agile teams throw away documentation, and we're in a regulated environment and we need our documentation. I think lots of it is definitely myths, and that's probably why it's not considered. Yeah, I think, of course, it's an expensive exercise. It's Agile transformation specifically. It's a big investment. And there's no guarantee, right, that you'll get there. But if you focus on the culture that you create, I've seen it specifically where we've been involved in Agile coaching with our clients, is if the culture exists, the culture that I sort of try to explain, if that exists, the values and principles, it's just so much easier. So culture might be an obstacle as well.
All right, thank you, Melani. I see we're right on 12 o'clock. That makes it 11 back in the UK. That is our hour for today. Melani, thank you so much for sharing your expertise today and certainly your passion for the topic. I think it's been a great illustration of the concepts in terms of Agile and some great insights in terms of where people might start. For everyone that attended today, thank you so much for joining our 3rd Insight session this month in terms of business agility and how you might think about it a little bit differently. The team, as always, are available to you for questions that you could send in via email. And if you have ideas on the next topics you'd like to hear from us, then please do email that through to us. In the interim, stay safe, stay well, and practice Agile. Thank you so much for attending today, and enjoy your day. Thank you.